Okay, I believe we are recording. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you all hopefully know by now, WRJ will be honoring several remarkable women during our upcoming Women's Empowerment Awards event on May 13th. This week, we are featuring honoree Ronnie Zuhlke. I hope you will go to our Facebook page and check out the wonderful video about her for more information about her background. Ronnie, first of all, let me just say how remarkable I find both your professional and your volunteer achievements to be. I can only imagine what your career was like as a woman working in such a male-dominated field, working with the United Steelworkers and United Mine Workers of America. And your volunteer work spans congregational involvement, interfaith engagement, Israel advocacy, and working on domestic issues like reproductive rights and voting rights. You are truly a remarkably empowered woman, and we're so pleased to be able to honor you with the Women's Empowerment Awards. In the nomination form for the award, your sisterhood at Temple Sinai in Pittsburgh, which was the group that nominated you, wrote this about you. Ronnie believes in grassroots advocacy. She sees political organizing and advocacy as a form of self-empowerment, especially for women, immigrants, and people of color. And she sees her role in this as an active listener and a builder of relationships. It's a beautiful description. Perhaps you can expand on that just a little bit and share with us what women's empowerment means to you and how that has played out in your life's work.
Thank you so much. That's such a lovely introduction. And first, a sincere thank you to the women of Temple Sinai who nominated me and who have been so supportive and encouraging. And then also to the WRJ, I am humbled to be among so many powerhouse women. So we're in Pesach, so I have to do a short Pesach story. Every year for the last X many years, in addition to the obvious Seder questions, I ask people around the table to name the 10 contemporary plagues. And unfortunately, that's not difficult to do. But I got an idea from a woman, and she said at her Seder, she asked people to name one personal plague and one personal miracle. And that just blew me away. And so I've incorporated it into my Seder and gotten a wonderful response. And I hope that the sense of hope will help drive us all. So, okay.
What was your personal plague and your personal miracle this year?
Oh my goodness. It's very political, the plague. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The plague was to see AIPAC endorse 37 Trump supporters. So sorry it was so political, but that's what it was. My miracle was that I fell. I'm 74 and I didn't need surgery.
Oh.
So the big blessing and feeling of gratitude there.
So we are glad you are okay.
Yeah, so I am definitely okay and plan to continue to be okay as best I can. So that's a great sort of segue. I think all of us have faced significant obstacles in our lifetimes, maybe some more than others, but it's not a contest. However, we have the opportunity to turn every bruise and every abuse into a chance for a positive outcome. So I believe that struggle is the essence of discovering our own voices and our own identities. I am long retired, as you can tell, and I believe that wisdom may rest in how we process our experiences. There's a song from the 1960s that was written by Joni Mitchell and made popular by Judy Collins. I've looked at life from both sides now. So one of the strengths of aging, I think, is to know how much there is yet to be learned, and to know that listening and developing relationships are an integral part of growth at any age. And that means reaching out to people with different life experiences, as Mara said, life experiences, culture, social class, ethnicity, faith-based traditions, and anything else I forgot. I think it also means willing to be in uncomfortable spaces and in difficult conversations. And I can develop that later. One example I want to share right now is I visited the West Bank in 2019, before the pandemic, with J Street and 5 members of Congress, including my representative, Mike Doyle, Judy Chu, and Jamie Raskin, and a couple of others. We met with settlers, we met with human rights activists, community activists, with Israeli and Palestinian government officials. We were guests at a Palestinian village whose school had been burned down. And they rebuilt the school, and I don't want to have to tell you that it got just demolished again. And the women there were just beginning to add their voices to those of the men.
There's a lot of wisdom in what you shared about working with people and empowering them, building relationships, particularly across lines of difference. What an inspiration, really, you are in your life experience. So with all the really interesting things that you've been doing, what's one of your proudest moments in lifting up the voices of other people, particularly those who don't have the same platform that you may have?
So I hope I can share a few because there are so many. So I'll try to work through them. When I was in the steel mill, and I really did not have a glorious job, it was a labor job, and I won't even bore you with the details. I was somehow able to secure 2 buses so that the unionists in my mill could go to a women's march in DC. Now, mind you, this is the mid-1980s, and the women's movement was not nearly as strong or as reflective of the working class as it is today. And then when I was in the mines, I was able to go with a contingent of women from my local to a women miners conference. Most of the women were single moms, and we had a relationship that went beyond words. One other quick mine story, which is about both women and men. The Ku Klux Klan announced, I had just been in the mines for a couple of weeks, and the Klan announced they were going to have a rally in a county south of Pittsburgh that's pretty conservative, but very much in coal country. I used that opportunity to basically to come out and to share that I was Jewish and that I was pretty progressive in my views. But the way I explained it was I talked about the Klan, and I talked about how the white nationalism and the white supremacy was totally tied into anti-unionism, anti-Semitism, and racism. So the crew got to know me. You know, it just helped make me a person. And then a couple of the leaders from my local actually provided the security at the anti-Klan rally. And security, I don't mean guns. They just stood there looking very strong. And it was a very proud moment in my life. One other one is my synagogue, Temple Sinai in Pittsburgh, opened up our vestibule doors, our hallway, in the height of the pandemic, not just to congregants, but also to the public. So people could come in and sign 2 criminal justice ballot initiatives. One was, getting rid of no-knock Brianna's Law. The other one was to restrict the use of solitary confinement. And both of those initiatives passed, one county, one city, by well over 60 to 70%. The problem now is the implementation. So the work goes on. All right, now I'm going to move a little bit away, if I may, from the social justice arena and talk about the Mitzvah of Tahara. For those of you who may not be familiar, this is the practice of cleansing, purifying with water, dressing, and reciting prayers with the deceased and a small group. And this is done just prior to putting the mate or the meta, the deceased, into the aron, or the coffin. And the folklore, and maybe Rabbi can help me out here, but the Jewish folklore says that the soul hovers over the deceased until the time of burial. Now, whether or not that's, technically true, the act of performing Tahara is a very special and very spiritual mitzvah for not just the deceased, but for the family, comfort for the family. And honestly, for all of us who are in the room performing the sacred work. And it becomes even more powerful when the deceased is somebody we knew, an untimely death or a tragic death, or in one case, when we had a sweet baby. And there were no words. There were no words. So kind of continuing that theme for just a moment, I live about 2.5 blocks from the Tree of Life. And there's a lot of story there, but I just want to boil it down to one thing. As a woman, I couldn't perform the Tahara on our male member, Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz, who was killed when he came in when he heard gunshots. So since I couldn't do Tahara, but I had to be there in some capacity, I helped lead Shmirah. And I had a couple of books of Psalms and, good things.
Yeah, just to explain, Shmirah is like watching, guarding the deceased's body.
Thank you. Thank you. So normally the practice would be, probably reading Psalms and whatever, but I was there with a group of people I didn't know who were friends of Jerry's. And instead what we did was we shared stories. I remember some of the stories. They were bittersweet. There was so much kavanah. And at the close of our time together, one of the men decided to join. We have the male and female, but that's a whole other story. Hever Kadisha, he decided to join. Just briefly on a personal level, I was able to be there for both my parents when my father contracted an untimely illness, and I was able to be there for him and be there for her. I was a teenager, that early passing of my father, preparing the funeral, etc., until the present. I feel like all of these experiences have helped shape me for what I stand for, because ultimately I think that moving from victimization to empowerment is very transformative.
Well, that's a perfect lead into the question I wanted to ask next. You touched on so many really powerful stories there that really weave together your professional work, your organizing and union work, standing up for women, organizing women, but also dealing with anti-Semitism, dealing with the crisis at Tree of Life, and dealing with the sacred rituals of death and honoring those who have passed. So, on one level, it's like, wow, the diversity of all of those experiences is really striking. But I'm curious, and you just started to touch on it, how you see Jewish values and Jewish tradition intersecting with the other work that you described of empowering others, the social justice work that you described. So how do Jewish values and empowerment intersect?
Oh, that's like a perfect question. The answer is totally enmeshed. So I feel like it's just an underlying set of values. Simplistically, love thy neighbor, welcome the stranger. But those are so deep and so profound. Who is our neighbor? Is it a geographic concept? Is it some other concept? And what does it mean? So to me, it means not just responding, just in quotes, to the Jewish Ukrainians, but to all the people who are suffering in various countries, in Syria, other countries, and even to Palestinians some of who lose their homes and their fields due to violence that's purposely perpetrated. In my activism, whether it's interfaith social justice or diplomacy and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, guns, punitive justice, criminalization of kids, I'm always striving to live my values. Our world seems to be getting increasingly polarized and less civilized. And the weaponization of all things, from the pandemic, vaccines and masks, to the othering of people for whatever reason, ethnicity, class, gender, ableism, they all fly in the face of the teaching of Judaism. They all fly in the face of basic humanitarianism. And at the end of the day, I think it's not just what we say, it's what we do.
Well, you've offered, so like I said before, very powerful imagery and in the stories and the description of the things that you've experienced in your personal life and in your career. So as one final question, I would just ask if you have any advice to offer women or others who are fighting for their rights to be heard, for empowerment.
So I do have some advice, and I teach some of my interfaith friends and clergy that everybody needs a Jewish mother in the most positive sense. So
either be a Jewish mother or find a Jewish mother, right?
and you can do both, because every Jewish mother needs a Jewish mother. Anyway, so the long and the short of it is, I think in order for us to be heard, it's critical that we learn to listen and listen well. One phrase that I heard recently is something like, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a chair. But what I would say, this is a little more personal, don't let the past hold you back. If you've been treated poorly, didn't have role models, and that's in the past or currently, and boy, who hasn't been held down or held back by for some others, that we can find our voices, even if slowly and carefully. I think that building positive relationships, letting go, or helping to define the toxic ones as best we can is really critical. And tikkun olam, repairing the world, at least for me, starts at home and needs a foundation of both self-respect and self-care.
Wonderful advice to end our conversation on self-care and care for others, all woven together in a really powerful way. Ronnie, thank you for spending the time with us. And thank you to all those who log into Facebook Live to watch this recording. We apologize that we weren't able to be live today due to technical difficulties, but I'm sure that you've all enjoyed this, this interview as much as I have. I hope those of you who are able will tune in next week for our continuing on the Facebook, hopefully live series. Our next session will be Tuesday, April 26th, with one of our other honorees, Rabbi Susan Shankman, and then following that on Monday, May 2nd, with honoree Mara God. There's still time to register for the Women's Empowerment Awards event on May 13th. And I hope you'll all go to our website, wrj.org, to register if you have not done so already. Thank you to Natalie Bowles, who is assisting us with technology today in the background. And once again, Ronnie, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And congratulations, you are so deserving of this award. And we are looking forward to May 13th when you'll officially get the award.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.